Hey everyone, it's Laura Brown of Intuitive Alchemy, and I am here with your weekly consciousness message. I am sure you're probably feeling it a little bit too, but I still hope you're having a wonderful start to your week. I, oddly enough, had channeled earlier at the end of August that September, specifically the end of September, I was going to want to take some time for self-care, for self-nurturing, for just kind of finding my rhythm for myself. And so I blocked off that time in my books. I didn't take any sessions aside from recording some, courses that I'm doing. Aside from some podcast interviews, I'm just immersing myself in nurturing. And the reason I was told to do that was because the energy of October is going to be, October and November specifically, is going to be quite intense. They mentioned potential increases in the spread and the virality, I guess, of coronavirus. They mentioned that there would be externally on a global level and a lot of tension and a lot of stress. And since so many of us are still in a place where we quite haven't found that, that field of 0 point neutrality, a lot of what affects us internally is actually coming from the external. And obviously, we want to really begin to reverse that. We want to really begin to unhook from that. We do not want to have our internal space so intrinsically linked to the external and hooked into that, so that every time something happens outside of us, it is immediately absorbed and attached to by ourselves and allowed to impact what we feel, our state of being, our frequency, etc. Now, I know that is a very, very hard thing for us all to do, especially since we are taught very, very early on that we're products of our environment. But even acknowledging or accepting that as a truth is a choice. So we have to be exceptionally aware as we go into these final days of September, as we have the full moon that's coming on the 1st, and we enter into October, that we need to be very, very aware of how we allow the external to impact the internal. Now, whether that means less time on social media, whether that means that we just stay away from the news. I'm pretty sure that if if something goes down that is pretty heavy, there is somebody who's going to get in touch with you. Whether that means, trying to take as much time for yourself to get out into nature, to ground, to do whatever it is that you have to do to feel held, supported, and insulated. We really need to focus on that. Mainly because what they kept showing me was that if we didn't, there would be this contraction, there'd be this gripping. And when we would get into that place, we would begin, and I mean this the royal we, of course, would begin to turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms. We would begin to turn to those habits and patterns that we have that do not serve us in the slightest. So it's extremely important that we begin immediately this week taking stock of what it is that we can do to insulate ourselves from the tension that is rising more and more in the collective. Yes, part of it is a mirror of what many of us are experiencing because of the symptoms we are experiencing, many of which some of us could be fighting because we just don't want to accept that a particular evolution is taking place. It could be symptoms that people don't quite understand what they are, what they pertain to. And even if they do know what they're about, they could still be struggling to handle the feeling that they're going through, the symptoms that they're going through. I know that I just talked earlier today with the Angel from Holistic Fashionista. I was on her podcast, and we were talking about how, loud sounds, too many people talking at once, just ringing of the ears, certain foods. Like, there's so many different ways in which the human body, as it acclimates to these energies, is impacted. And whether we know about it or not, whether we understand what it's about or not, it can still be a bit of a scary sort of disjointed type of feeling. So we really want to work very hard this week to think about how we can insulate ourselves, to think about the ways in which we can nurture ourselves, even if you don't have the capacity to, black out the last several days of this week. That's fine. But you surely have at least 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 15 minutes here, where you can do something that is just to take care of you. And that includes kind of unplugging. You don't need to be attached to the news. You don't need to be attached to social media. You don't need to know second by second what is happening out in the world, because we kind of already know. It's going to be a shit show of an election. It's going to be a shit show of Republicans versus Democrats, and, BLM, supporters versus BLM, what's the word I'm looking for? Dissidents, or, whatever the word is, you get it. So there's going to be a lot that we're going on. We already know, because we've been watching it go down for the past several months. We don't need to continue to allow that into our field, mainly because our nervous systems have had enough. And we cannot continue to plug in to the fear mongering and to the fear paradigms and into the anxiety paradigms and into the, oh my God, we're going to hell in a handbasket paradigms, if we want to get to a space where we are capable of accessing those higher frequencies of energy, where we're capable of connecting to a higher state of consciousness. So it is exceptionally important that we begin to really clear out the density of our being, that we really insulate ourselves from anything that just, we don't need a constant replay of. We already know that it's happening. And we don't especially need to get ourselves so worked up, to contract and to grasp and to grip, that we end up becoming so overwhelmed, so stressful, that we actually move in the opposite direction that we're supposed to, by turning to old coping mechanisms, drinking, shopping, maybe drugs, maybe, it could be anything, but it's likely things that don't serve you. It's likely things that actually are to your detriment. So I really encourage everyone this week to make their highest focus self-care, and to then make their priority to unplug, to just begin to ask what feels good when I invite it into my field and what doesn't. If it doesn't feel good, stop watching it, listening to it, doing it, taking it, drinking it, eating it, etc. Take lots of time for all the things that you tell yourself you don't have time for. That's bullshit. You do. You just have to manage your time better. And even if it's not necessarily this really lengthy process, or you don't have an entire afternoon, it doesn't matter. You still have the time somewhere. So take it, and take it for yourself. Because contrary to what you've been told, you're allowed to. You can. You can do good things for yourself. You can actually be in service of self. We're meant to be in service of self. Yes, we want to be in service of others, but we are also meant to be in service of self. And doing one without doing the other, it's not in fucking balance, man. So why would we, it doesn't even rationally make sense. So I encourage all of you, each and every single one of you, to be very careful around what it is you do this week. If you find yourself sliding into old spaces, go to your support system. Ask yourself if this is really going to help me, or is it just going to give me temporary relief when really what I need is a long-term solution. Nurture yourself. Stop telling yourself you don't have time, because that's bullshit. Everybody has the time. If you make it a priority, you have the time. Unplug from the news, unplug from social media, do whatever you can do to just stop listening to the narrative. It is not going to serve you. It is designed intentionally to not serve you. So just stop inviting it into your field, and to make sure that you're not falling into old coping mechanisms. Make sure that you are putting self-care, self-nurturing at the top of your list. Give yourself permission to be in service of self. It is allowed. And if it doesn't feel good, sound good, taste good, whatever, stop doing it. You don't need to engage. Just because you've always done it doesn't mean you need to keep doing it. There's many, many things that we do that are totally, completely not good for us. And we continue doing them because, well, it's just the way I've always been. It's just the way I've always done things. Well, keep doing the same thing over and over. You're going to continue to get the same thing over and over. So I'm asking each and every one of you, for your own benefit as well as the collective's benefit, unhook from what they're trying to plug into you. Unhook from what they're trying to implant within you. Because the energy of October and November, between what they showed me of an increase in the spread of coronavirus, there's a kind of consciousness to this virus, and it is kind of trying to catch us when we're not quite looking, when we're facing in another way, thinking like, phew, glad that's over with. No, it's not. And the energy from multiple other spaces, not just the election, are also going to be high. But we have a choice as to whether or not that's allowed into our space, into our fields, and if we are going to be impacted by it. That is our choice. We always have that sovereignty. We always have that choice. And my hope is that each and every single one of you choose to just be like, nope, not today, not tomorrow either, no more. Because that's what I'm doing to the best of my ability. And that's what many, many others that I know of who are conscious of what is happening are doing as well. And even if you don't still, believe in anything that we've talked about, or that I teach or practice, or you see in other spaces, is it still not mentally good for you? Is it still not for your nervous system good for you? I would think that that's probably, as rhetorical of a question or set of questions as one could really go. So I really want you to focus on you this week and to prepare yourself. And by prepare yourself, I don't mean drop into fear. I mean, get clear on what you're going to allow in your field. Get clear on how you're going to insulate yourself. Get clear on what feels supportive, nurturing, and otherwise. You don't need to drop into fear. I'm not afraid of the tension. I'm not afraid of what they're showing me about October and November, because I'm choosing to not allow it into my field. I'm choosing not to engage with it. I am completely unplugging from it. I want nothing to do with it. Because if I have anything to do with it, if you or anybody else has anything to do with it, we're rooted in the density of our being. And we can't go to the new if we're still carrying around the old. So I hope that each and every single one of you take this not as a message of fear, but as a message of, it's time to fucking reclaim your power. You can control this. You have the choice as to whether or not this affects you. You have the choice as to whether or not the external is allowed to impact the internal. It doesn't have to. You have the power to say whether it does or it doesn't. And you have the choice of either taking actions that insulate you from all of that bullshit, or that puts you right in the line of fire of it. But that's your choice, nobody else's. So I hope that you choose wisely and for your highest and best. I hope that you feel empowered and powerful to reclaim your sovereignty and to step back into a place where you understand that you're not helpless or, without recourse, that you have way more power than you could possibly conceive of. So I send you all of my love. I send you all the blessings. And I hope that you have an amazing, empowered, and sovereign week.